totally necessary. You might think that effectively in a time of war, that killing someone through a drone strike is acceptable. But it's another step and another stage altogether to celebrate someone's death. So there's an element of the philosophical about this conversation. But there's also a practical question too. Do you think that drone strikes are extrajudicial killings by another name? Do you think they are entirely justified? I want to get your view on that, and I want to know where you stand. For me, I feel uncomfortable with it intuitively, but I don't know why it is that I don't spend more of my time questioning. And you'll get plenty of people who think that Obama used drone strikes, arguably in a disproportionate way, that there are those who are strong critics of Obama precisely for his administration's use of drone strikes. You can Google it. 0345 60 60 973 if you want to have your say. And you can text, of course, 84850. Tweet at LBC. If you want to come and find me on Twitter, it's at Matthew Stadlen. And if you don't abuse me, I won't mute you. You can email matts@lbc.co.uk. I quite often don't mute people until quite some time down the lane, the road, the murky road of their abuse. As I say, I almost quite enjoy it sometimes. It's important to mute as little as possible. This is something that Libby Purvis, I think the Times columnist, said to me when I was interviewing her at a literary festival the other day. Important to mute as few people as possible on Twitter. Muting is when you don't block them so they can still see your tweets, but you just you can't see them. So when they abuse you don't see it. They're shouting into the ether, shouting at their keyboard, not even necessarily knowing that you can't hear them. But the reason you shouldn't mute people is because you don't want to live in an echo chamber. You want to live in an environment where your views are challenged. And that is one of the great joys of this programme. That's why I encourage people to call up and disagree with me. I, for one, to give you my very strong view on this, do not even think to myself in the privacy of my own mind, I do not think good riddance to someone like Sally Ann Jones when we hear that she's reportedly been killed by a drone strike. I don't think that. Doesn't mean that I don't despise everything that she's supposed to have done. It doesn't mean I don't condemn in every conceivable way what ISIS do. But can I find it myself to celebrate a death? Not quite. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you feel differently. 0345 60 60 973. Let's see what Abbas in Redbridge thinks. Abbas, very good morning to you.
Hi there. Good morning, Matt. I do believe that, people who obviously commit murder or encourage others to commit murder should be, even perhaps executed if that's the only solution that's left to prevent the loss of innocent lives. But I think the problem with drone strikes is that, I was watching some charity workers who were working in Waziristan in Pakistan, and they were saying that in 1 year, more than 1,400 civilians were killed by these drone strikes. We call it collateral damage, but, these are families that are innocent and that are being destroyed as a consequence of taking out one or two suspected operatives. And most of the kids, they said, in that area in Waziristan were suffering from post-traumatic stress. They were running inside their homes whenever they heard the humming noise of the drones because they thought they were going to die. And so I think, we have to be careful when we're so gung-ho. We sort of... we sort of say that these people should be killed, they should be taken out at sort of any consequence. And I think that's just a little bit insensitive because, there are a lot of innocent people who are caught up by these drone strikes.
When you hear, Abbas, of this British IS recruiter, Sally Ann Jones, when you hear that she has reportedly been killed by a US drone strike in Syria in June, there's a story her death was reported in The Sun first, I think. When you hear of that and you hear of what she's supposed to have done, what goes through your mind, or indeed what goes through your heart?
To be honest, if I'm completely honest with you, even when Saddam Hussein was killed or Gaddafi was killed, or I hear about any death, including, a mass gunman in America who's not a Muslim and he's shot dead, or a kid who goes into a school, I just find it a very sobering thought that, that of course, very sobering about the victims and very hurtful about the victims, but even about the perpetrators. I find it very difficult to celebrate the killing of anyone, including somebody, who may well have been guilty of killing many other people. I just find it a very sobering thought.
So a lot of people would disagree with you, and a lot of people would disagree with me. Back in 2015, the Defence Secretary then, as now, Michael Fallon, he said that the UK would not hesitate to launch more secret drone strikes in Syria to thwart terror plots. He said that the RAF strike that killed 2 British Islamic State jihadists was a perfectly legal act of self-defence. And he said there are other terrorists involved in other plots that may come to fruition in weeks or months, he said. Now, we need, as a country, to supervise, through conversations like this, the sort of activities that our government carries out, or that our armed forces in some way or other carries out, because otherwise we're not doing our job either as journalists or citizens. Do you think that we should cease all drone strikes in Syria or in Iraq?
Well, let me give you an analogy, and I think it works quite well. What people need to really think about is when the Irish conflict was happening and we had Irish people coming over here recruiting and raising money, funds, to commit terrorism. And actually, we knew who they were. We suspected who these operatives were. Would we ever launch drone strikes against those people in Ireland when those conflicts were going on, with the knowledge that innocent Irish people, who are obviously the predominant number, would have also been killed? And if the answer to that is that no, we would not have done that, then why is it acceptable for a Syrian innocent life or a Iraqi innocent life or a Pakistani innocent life to be lost in that way? Because if we think on the one hand it's okay for a brown-faced individual to lose their life, even if they are innocent, but if it's somebody closer to home, an Irish person, and they're white, and possibly an innocent person being killed in that drone strike would be wrong, then I think we need to ask the moral question as to whether we value life equally around the world, or whether colour, race and religion actually play a part. And I would hope that most decent people would actually equate the life of an Arab or a life of an Asian or a life of a black man or a black woman to be worth exactly the same as the life of a white person or a Brit or an Irish person.
And Abbas, I would totally agree with you that, of course, all lives are equal, and I would suggest that there are plenty of people who have levelled serious allegations against the British state in how it behaved in Northern Ireland and during the Troubles. I think it's a very interesting point that you raise. Why would there not be drone strikes in Ireland? I think one answer, and I hope this is the truth, would be that Ireland was much more accessible to the British military and to the police than, and indeed we'd had a British police force in Northern Ireland, much more accessible than Syria. So I think the reason the government would give is that Syria is so impenetrable by our military and by the US military, and indeed I imagine, Abbas, you might well argue against, for various reasons, you might argue against having forces on the ground there. By drone strikes, we save the lives of Brits while at the same time trying to save people from the revolting grip of IS. But I hear what you say about the collateral damage. I hear what you say about those civilians who die as a result. And I was one of the first to stick my head up above the parapet and condemn what Israel was doing back in 2014, in my view, disproportionately killing Palestinians. And so we do have to subject our own country and indeed America to the same sort of tests. And I think it's for that reason it's important we're having this conversation. The real question I'm asking you, though, over the next 45 minutes, and thank you for that, Abbas, is this. When you hear that the so-called British White Widow, Sally Ann Jones, has been reportedly killed in June by a US drone strike in Syria, do you allow yourself to celebrate? 0345 6060 973.